Today on Inspired Money.
We hit 7 figures. We're on track to literally have the best year. We're about to make 2 hires. And I was even more excited because I'd finally fired myself from a lot of the work I really shouldn't have been doing to actually be more at that like upper level working on the business rather than in the business. And so I just give that context because March hits, and literally in the span of 48 hours as kind of the pandemic's happening, we lose essentially $500,000 overnight, just evaporates from lost business. So that happens. I actually get sick with COVID. I get my wife sick.
This is episode 159 with CEO and founder of GrowthHit, Jim Huffman.
Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If this is your first time with us, welcome. Today's guest sent me this email. It read, "My name is Jim. I run an agency called GrowthHit, and I'm a Techstars mentor. Last week, I published a post about how my agency lost $400,000 in annual recurring revenue in 48 hours, how I tested positive for COVID-19, and all without having any childcare." I clicked on his link, and it led to his blog post entitled, "The Hardest Day of My Career, Losing $400,000, Testing Positive, and Frozen too." Do you want to hear more? Yeah, me too. I looked at Jim's bio and I saw that he's grown 2 startups from idea to over $10 million in sales. He's spent over $4 million on Facebook and Instagram ads. He's led marketing workshops at Fortune 500 brands like FedEx, Hot Wheels, and Intuit. I figured losing $400,000 could be a great Inspired Money story. There's got to be a lot of lessons to be learned. In this episode, we cover what growth marketing is. And I didn't know what ABM stood for. It stands for account-based marketing. We talk about that. Why Jim thinks running a bootstrapped agency is better than working at a startup that's shooting for a lucrative exit. And of course, you're going to get the lessons about digging a business out of a pandemic crisis. In Jim's case, losing over 40% of your revenue in 48 hours while you have COVID. Now let's get inspired with Jim Huffman. Jim, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Awesome, Andy. Pumped to be here.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
I think it goes back to like my first venture, which it was like early middle school. We'll call it 6th grade. I mean, I'd like mow my own lawn and stuff and do that. But it was me and a buddy, Jeff. We started we'll call it an enterprise where we would spray. So we're in like the suburbs. I grew up in Oklahoma City, where on your sidewalk, you would have the name of your street address. And so we'd walk around the neighborhood and we'd see their sidewalk where you couldn't even see the address if it's like 2717 or whatever. So we'd knock on their door and ask them like, "Hey, would you like us to repaint your sidewalk?" And I think we charged like $20. And so it was kind of a no-brainer because we're like, you can't even see it. It doesn't look good. We have the spray paint. We have the stencils, $20. Can you do it? The only time they wouldn't convert would be if they didn't have cash on them because there wasn't like Venmo at the time. So it was a nice little enterprise. It was fun to like build up, a little bit of cash, but we actually realized we were horrible at stencils and spray painting. So when someone had like an 8 in their address, we're like, oh man, 8s are the hardest. Like we wanted the address to be like 1111 or something very basic. But that was my first enterprise of thinking of making money, having to know expenses, which was like really buying spray paint and stencils and trying to like build up money. So for me, I could buy like the new Penny Hardaway shoes or the Jordans that I wanted. But that was kind of my first understanding of money, revenue, expenses, and profit.
That's a cool one. I love the creativity, and it's highly practical because the people who needed the service, it's like, all right, $20, just give it to the kids, and things look better, hopefully, as long as you didn't have an 8 in your address.
Yeah, or if we spray painted too much and it would drip and it looked horrible, and then we just felt really bad. So yeah, the quality of work was suspect.
Well, you were 6th graders. So, Jim, you're CEO of GrowthHit and author of the Growth Marketer's Playbook. Let's start super basic. What is growth marketing?
Growth marketing, if we take a step back, it's like, what is even traditional marketing? That's kind of top of funnel marketing. We can think of it in a classic sense like Mad Men. It's like you come up with the killer ad campaign, you write the copy, you get the creative, you throw some ad dollars behind it, and then boom, all your dreams come true, right? With growth marketing, and you kind of layer in this idea of digital, it's really a full funnel approach from top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of the funnel, where the goal isn't necessarily impressions or clicks. The goal is business sustainability, like wanting to get customers, get sales, wanting to have a ROI positive campaign, and build a sustainable business. And so it's really wanting to be lockstep with the founders, the CEO, and their goals, and having not just a marketing, but a growth strategy to help hit those.
And how does ABM or account-based marketing fit into that?
Yeah. So traditionally with a B2B company, business to business, if you have a customer or a client that is going to pay you over $50K in a year, you can do what's called ABM. And that's where you kind of flip your marketing funnel or growth funnel on its head, and you start from a bottoms up approach. Because if you're going to be making over $50K in a year from somebody, you could probably write on a piece of paper, who are those ideal prospects? And you're not selling t-shirts or widgets that are $20 to $100 where you have to close thousands or millions of customers or transactions. Really, you potentially just need a handful. And so the thing that's nice about that approach is, okay, we're going to do ABM, flip the strategy on its head, do a bottoms up approach where you literally list out 100 potential prospects or clients. And the strategy works where even before you do cold outreach or try and get in front of them, you do what's kind of called pre-ads, and you're uploading their email list into LinkedIn, into Facebook, to Instagram. You're running ads, but the whole goal is not to sell. It's to be positioned as a thought leader. And you want to do that in the form of giving them access to maybe a webinar, it's a download, or know what's very contextual for them right now and give them a piece of content that helps answer or identify the struggles they have. That way, when you start to do, maybe it's cold outreach or get in front of them with a partnership, they're like, oh, wait, I've seen GrowthHit. I've seen that brand because they were pushing this content that was actually really helpful. And then from there, when you do the cold outreach, you still want to just add value. And so like with some B2B companies, it's a free trial, it's a free strategy call, it's a free audit. And then as you give value to them, you can also qualify them. And then you can hopefully turn them from a prospect to an actual client. And so that ABM strategy, we actually do it for our own agency. And then for B2B clients, we do parts of it as well. And it's something that, B2B companies, when you have this really strong lifetime value, you could play that to your advantage because you don't have to do this spray and pray approach. You can actually do almost like a one-to-one marketing strategy with ABM.
It sounds really well thought out, sinister almost, in that it's like you've masterminded some kind of plan.
Yeah, which is why I try and default to adding value, because we all hate being attacked by cold emails or like when people know too much information about you and they target you in a way that's creepy. That can kind of, there's a line in the sand and how you want to utilize it in the best way to take advantage of it, I guess.
So Jim, I understand that you started out in investment banking. So how is it that you learned growth marketing?
Yeah, so I started my career in finance, and coming out of school with a finance degree, I literally thought you had three options for a career. It's like you should be a management consultant, an investment banker, or you could be like a trader or something. And so when I went into M&A investment banking, and for me that was fascinating because it was a small investment bank that did a lot of deals actually in the energy and kind of oil field services sector. And so a lot of these entrepreneurs, I got to meet them at a really cool phase. They built up a business and they're about to sell it for anywhere from $50 million to like $300 million. And so I'm meeting them and I'm just out of school. I'm the person making the spreadsheets and the models. If I'm in a meeting with the lawyers, the MBAs, and the acquiring company, I'm not talking. I'm literally just handing out the model. And if they talk to me, it's bad because it means I messed up a number, and hopefully that's not happening. But what was eye-opening in those meetings was the most impressive person to me wasn't the MBA, it wasn't the lawyer. It was the entrepreneur that took an idea to something that's very real. And I was like, I want to be on that side of the table. I want to be working with them. And so this was a time, it's like 2010, where the high growth companies were kind of in the tech and the online space. And so I went from investment banking I switched careers, went to a startup out in New York where I was doing email newsletters. And the people in my network, my family, are kind of like, wait, why are you have this finance degree and now you're like working on subject lines if they should have an emoji or not? Like, I'm very confused with this path. But the thing for me, because I was like, oh, should I like look at getting an MBA? I kind of looked at this as like, this is my MBA. And I just went all in and I was like, let me do whatever I can at this startup to help. And I got lucky in that it was a high growth startup. I was employee like 25. I wrote it to like employee 150. And with these high growth companies, if you can prove value, they always have problems and opportunities, and they just want people to throw at them. So it's like, okay, you figured that out. We're doing this e-commerce thing. Jim, go figure it out. And so I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that means, but let me do that. Jim, we need to figure out SEO. Go figure that out. And so from the growth, opportunities emerge if you're willing to kind of cluelessly stumble your way to figuring it out. And then after that, I was able to go to another company and kind of be their head of marketing, head of growth. And then the thing that I lucked out with there is I got connected with a few venture capital firms and got to kind of work with some of their founders, whether it's advising on growth or talking about what I've done in the past. And I started teaching digital marketing at this place called General Assembly. So it was just kind of one little door of opportunity would lead to another one that I would follow that eventually led to GrowthHit.
In the investment banking role, since you were only talking if you made a mistake, like your responsibility was very specific and very narrow. And then in the startup environment, you were kind of doing everything and anything and working really quickly. Is it correct to assume that you preferred that startup environment?
Yeah, that's a good question, because what is nice about like investment banking and whatnot, like the training programs are usually quite good. And this is how we do our models. Here's the format. Here's how it's done. If you have issues, ask your associate because they've done this 1,000 times. And it is nice because there's a clear path, but it can also be limiting where you're like, hey, I want to do more than that. I want exposure to this and that. And it can get a little monotonous. Whereas in the startup realm, it is like, hey, there's no training protocol. It's your first day. Hopefully we'll have a desk for you. And by the way, here's 20 things that are happening. Help us figure it out. And the thing that I liked about that is it wouldn't really put a ceiling on you. And the other thing that I found is sometimes don't go where you actually are excited to work, but go where you can have the biggest impact. And one example was our sales team was getting quite big and they wanted to go all in on building a CRM. But the problem is no one had experience and no one wanted to do it because it sounded quite boring. But what I realized is the person who cared about the CRM the most was the CEO. And if I work on building out the CRM, I am actually going to be working with the CEO. And so I took that on. I was working with him on Sunday nights to build this CRM. But from that, it kind of accelerated my growth to where he saw that I was doing that project well enough that if there was another big initiative, it's like, hey, I'll throw Jim on that because he did really well in the CRM project. And so that kind of openness and flexibility and lack of hierarchy, if you're young and hungry, you can potentially thrive in that.
That's a valuable tip. We got some insight into the value that you were delivering. You were employee 25 and then it grew to employee 150. What kind of results were you seeing in your marketing work that you were doing at that time?
Yeah, when I took it on, I was in Dallas and I had to launch the market and I had to do email marketing, and we were able to get that from no subscribers to six figures in subscribers. And so that really helped me understand, growing in a specific region, really the power of referrals and virality. And then from there, I got put on the e-commerce side. And for me, e-commerce was fascinating because it got me more and more exposure to SEO and to merchandising. And we were able to take that from just an idea to actually like a 7-figure business in 2 years. And so it was fun to do something, get some growth, and then be thrown to the next one. But yeah, those were kind of the results that I got with my two initiatives there.
You mentioned teaching at General Assembly. Why were you interested in taking a teaching role?
I kind of view teaching a little bit like coaching, where I, growing up, it was probably the most impacted by coaches and sports. And I did a little bit of coaching, literally just middle school girls basketball for a couple summers. And I really enjoyed it. And as you get into the working force, it's what is the equivalent of that? And I think teaching is that, especially when, I'm learning all this interesting stuff that I want to share. And I thought that was a really cool way to share it. But the thing that I didn't realize till after the fact is the best way to learn is to teach, because when you're in a classroom standing up in front of 30 people and you teach something or you're saying something, all of a sudden hands raise and they have questions, you're going to learn real quick how well you know something. And so I actually used to dread oh crap, what are the questions going to be? But then you start to get pretty confident where you feel like you can handle any questions. But it really helped me kind of sharpen my saw, stay really sharp as a marketer by teaching. But I didn't realize that till after I got into it.
A lot of people are reluctant to make that leap because maybe it's imposter syndrome. They feel like, I don't know enough. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that General Assembly is continuing education for professionals. So you'd be leading a class for other professionals. Did you ever feel any of that?
Oh, 100%. I still do, even when I teach. But it's also if you can stay true to your curriculum and it's something that you not only know but are passionate about, then I think it's okay, because there would even be times when I wouldn't have the answer, and it's just being very honest and overt with that. But it's if you know the curriculum and you feel confident you can answer 75% of the questions, then hopefully you can kind of get over that fear and that imposter syndrome. But yeah, I absolutely had that. I remember the first few courses, or classes, walking in and I go to the front of the class feeling like a complete fraud because they're oh wait, this guy is going to be teaching this. But yeah, that's definitely a normal feeling. At least it was for me. Hopefully it is for other people.
Well, I'm sure that growing up in the startup world where you were doing many things and everything, you were doing a lot more than somebody in a more structured corporate role where they had not been exposed to as much. So you were definitely several steps ahead.
Yeah, and it's something I struggle with. It's this idea of a generalist versus a specialist. When to decide, do you want to kind of be get exposure to everything, kind of know how to do it, but you can't go deep? Or when you're okay, this is my thing, let me go really, really deep. And so I've kind of always hovered back and forth between the two. But the thing is, I'm getting more and more experience. If you can be aware with what you know and what you don't know, and with the things you don't know, it's not about knowing or trying to learn it, but how to ask questions to manage the experts in it the most effective way. But yeah, that's something that I think maybe a lot of people wrestle with as well.
So in your teaching, you were positioned as a specialist in growth marketing or digital marketing. How is it that sort of launched a side hustle that grew into where you are today?
Yeah, I was actually teaching a class in New York, and afterwards someone came up to me oh, that thanks for the class. That was nice. Do you do like growth plans? And I was like, yeah, like complete lied. And they're like, what do you charge? And I literally had no rate. I didn't even think. I just blurted out a number. I think I said like $500 or something, which I later realized I'm horrible at pricing and I totally undersold my services. But I did a growth plan for them. They were pretty happy with it. Like, okay, will you execute this? And I totally did not expect that as a follow-up question. And so I was like, yeah. And then I priced them on that. And then as I was teaching and working with some of these VCs, these little one-off consulting gigs popped up, and they actually started to kind of pile up to where I was doing them on like nights and weekends and in the mornings before work. And so I'm using all my spare time to do this consulting. I'm also doing a full-time job. I kind of hit a inflection point. I'm like, okay, what am I doing here? It's like, I'd like to have a life. I'd like to hang out with my wife. I should probably make a decision. And so I was able to get 2 clients at the time to pay me enough that would offset my salary and agree to 6-month-long engagements. And once I had that was how I was able to mitigate my risk and kind of make the jump. But how I made that decision was I was much more fulfilled and energized by the consulting work. And the thing that I didn't realize till I got into it, like I was working with some B2B companies, some B2C companies. And as I was getting more and more exposures to different industries and business models, I felt like I was learning at a faster rate than just focusing on one company and going deep. And so it kind of made it a no-brainer for me to make the jump, especially when I was able to kind of mitigate my risk with getting those 2 contracts.
You were in investment banking, then you were on the startup side, and then you launched your own business as an entrepreneur. How does that reflect your evolving views of wealth and lifestyle?
I mean, I think everyone to some extent is definitely motivated by money. I'm motivated by it from the perspective that I think money gives you freedom to do what you want. Going from paycheck to paycheck to having a nice nest egg allows you to create the lifestyle you want, which is what I think is the most valuable thing for it. So with that like foundation in mind, my career path definitely had a part driven by money, which is why I went into investment banking, because it's like, that's what I was told is the path to set yourself up financially. And I liked business, and I thought like working on mergers, acquisitions would be really fun. And as I got into it, you kind of see the path for it, you see your upside, but then you also are like, wait, am I actually fulfilled by looking at spreadsheets and whatnot? And then I kind of followed a path, not necessarily that was financially based, but more what I was interested and passionate about, because I definitely could have made more money in investment banking than going to like a startup. But here's the big insight that I learned is, I thought the way you made money with startups was you are either a founder where you have significant equity, or you are an employee where you get this thing called stock options, and you wait for a day when a company IPOs or there's an exit, and that's your payout. That's what I thought was the norm. But as I saw really talented, smart employees of startups, founders of startups, pour their heart and soul into something and really not get that payday at the end of it, or they have an exit, but because there was a down round, because of other issues, they actually didn't get that money that they thought was coming. And so it actually changed everything when I started to realize that. And I went down the path of, okay, I would rather have a company where I own 100% of it, I bootstrap it, and I can create this reoccurring revenue to allow me to have that freedom to do what I want. And some people could kind of call this the category of a lifestyle business, which has a negative connotation in the startup world. I actually think it's the opposite, because I think you're in control and you are able to start to control that lever of cash to give you the freedom that you want. And so what I care about more than anything now is, what is our cash reserves we have, how much money are we bringing in per month versus the expenses, and then as I can build up this war chest of cash, like what could I do with that? Is that to pay myself and my team really well? Is that to invest in other things? So I've changed 3 times in how I look at money and wealth, because you spend so many hours in a day doing this thing called work. So many people ignore, what is the end goal of this? What is the number you're trying to hit? What is that monthly income you want to give you the freedom or the things that you want to have?
Coming up, building a bootstrapped agency with the goal of launching bigger things. Jim and his wife get COVID-19. Then listen to the end to hear how Jim not only responded to losing half his clients, but how he's come back and grown his revenues to $1.5 million during this pandemic. All that and more right after this short break. The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/159. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more about Jim, GrowthHit, and everything else mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Have you heard of Inbox Zero? Odds are you have. I'm embarrassed to admit that I've got Inbox 12,000. Did you know that the phrase and philosophy of Inbox Zero came from productivity guru Merlin Mann? He's founder and writer of 43 Folders, a blog about finding the time and attention to do your best creative work. By his definition, Inbox Zero doesn't refer to fanatically keeping your inbox empty all the time. Instead, he refers to the amount of time your brain is in your inbox. Because we all receive a lot of email, probably more than ever, we need a simple, repeatable system for dealing with high-volume email. Specifically, Merlin says you cannot use your email as a to-do list, and he shares a system for how to spend less time on email. I watched Merlin Mann present at Google Tech Talks on YouTube. The video runs just under an hour. The presentation's about 30 minutes, and then with Q&A. I highly recommend it. I'm going to include a link in the show notes, but here are some highlights. Number 1, keep your email program closed for most of the day. 2, follow the principle of delete, delegate, respond, defer, or do when processing email. The key to this is that you don't want to just check email. Checking email allows it to accumulate and grow. Processing the email, either deleting, delegating, responding, deferring, that means that you're just going to respond to it later in the day, or doing. Using these 5 action verb responses translates to more action, allowing us to focus on stuff that's more important to us. If you're like me and have over 10,000 emails in your inbox, you can create a DMZ folder, put all the emails into that folder, and just start from scratch. And here's a great tip. Always respond immediately to messages that can be answered in 2 minutes or less. That's a rule borrowed from David Allen's popular Getting Things Done productivity philosophy. Your time and attention are finite. Getting your email under control is a proactive approach to managing action in your life. How does this directly relate to money? It's a money tip because cleaning out your inbox can mean avoiding temptation by unsubscribing from marketing emails. I know that emails from Nike or Billabong or Crate & Barrel, they come in constantly. So I recommend that you unsubscribe from those emails by clicking on the unsubscribe link, usually at the bottom of those emails, to opt out of those lists. Spending to save is a really bad idea. You know, when there's a sale that tries to tempt you to buy things that you don't really need, clean out your inbox, especially getting rid of those marketing newsletters, and you'll be less inclined to spend on stuff that you don't need. Plus, you're going to gain more time by acting on more important things. And you know as well as I do, time is money. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. Have you signed up for the free 30-day challenge yet? It's not too late. You can sign up anytime. Actually, judging by my own progress, at the time of this recording, if you sign up right now, I'll be tracking along with you. I'm going to start doing it this week. The 30-Day Fear Challenge is writing down one thing a day that gets you out of your comfort zone, then crossing them off your list as you do them. It's a simple exercise, but after 30 consecutive days, let's see if it has an impact on our lives. Sign up at inspiredmoney.fm/challenge. That's inspiredmoney.fm/challenge. For compliance and legal, let's keep it safe. Don't do anything dangerous. Whether you're cliff diving or just trying to get to inbox zero, know that you're participating and choosing your daily challenges at your own risk. Again, sign up at inspiredmoney.fm/challenge. You're going to get a welcome email plus 4 additional emails, that's once a week, with tips and ideas. We can share our progress in the Inspired Money Makers Facebook group. If you complete it, I'll even award some prizes. Now let's do this and see if good things can happen. Our Inspired Moneymaker of the Week is Angel Jones in Trinidad and Tobago. Angel was a guest on Inspired Money episode 101. He's participating in the 30-day challenge and posted this in the Facebook group, taking up Andy on his challenge to do one new thing every day for 30 days. I'm taking the opportunity to do one chore every day. Today I transplanted a few large pimento and pepper trees and began a nursery with 10 different vegetables. That is so great, Angel. I'm afraid to do chores too, so this definitely counts. Sometimes those things on your to-do list that linger and just don't seem to go away, you can definitely add those. If this 30-day challenge can help you to clear perpetual items on your to-do list, go for it. That's a win. Thanks, Angel, for the great idea of something to add to our list of things that scare us. Keep up the great work. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. I love that. That's really cool. I think you're coming up on almost your 4th year anniversary at GrowthHit. It sounds like that evolution, the view on wealth and the business, that has even changed over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, because I heard you talk a little bit about, being distracted with the business, not really going all in on the agency and the recurring revenue.
Yeah, you're exactly right. For the first 2 years, I kind of ignored the fact that I had an agency. I was more of not even an agency, I was more of a consultant that was working on things. I would even work for half, retainer, half equity. And then in my spare time, I'm like, okay, let me work on the big idea. Let me work on something else that I would then try and raise money for and grow. But that wasn't working. I was starting and stopping on projects. I wasn't getting traction. But meanwhile, I wasn't really putting effort into it. And I was getting leads, getting good referrals, getting stuff coming in. And just in the past, year and a half, 2 years, I was like, I think a lot of people struggle with this. It's like I'm spreading myself too thin, which means I'm kind of selling a lot of things short, not doing it great. I'm doing it maybe decent. So I was like, let me ignore everything, go all in on actually building a sustainable business, building this consultancy, and then let's take it from there. And it's really transformed everything. I've hired extremely talented people that I can delegate to, that do the work better than I do, and really treating it like my top priority. And so, I wish I would have done that sooner.
So with reframing your priorities, the foundation sounds like it's the recurring revenue. It's building that, because it's one thing to have a lifestyle business when you can scale, when you can get your recurring revenue to a decent size. There's nothing wrong with that kind of business. In fact, that could be the best business.
Right. Yeah. If it can truly be repeatable and scalable and you can fire yourself, it's like that, and you have full control of it to do what you want, that's kind of the goal. And the thing that I'm inspired by is you can look at Andrew Wilkinson. He had Meta Labs as an agency. Now he has Tiny Capital, which is micro private equity, essentially. You can look at Eric Sue, who had Single Grain, which is an agency. Now he's investing in a lot of things. You can use, whether it's an agency, a productized service, or whatever bootstrap business you have, it can be a launch pad to other things you would want to do. If that's invest in companies, buying companies, or starting things up. But it's like, build that launchpad company, make it sound, do it right, focus, ignore other things, and then you can maybe figure out that jumping off point.
So with Andrew and Eric as guys that you look up to, what is your vision for GrowthHit?
Yeah. So I want to build the best-in-class outsourced growth team. So when anyone's looking to grow their company, whether it's a VC-backed company or it's a big brand that wants, to run like a startup, I want to be top of mind, to be like that premium outsourced growth team that's running the growth experiments and doing the strategy. And the reason why I want to have that is not just to help clients, but eventually, if we're such a good growth team, why can't we grow our own things? And so the skill sets that I think that I care about is it's obvious that we have the skills around the growth team, but our secret sauce that people don't realize until they start working with us is our process. And if we know how to grow, if we know how to run a process, to do SOPs, to train people, to scale things. Those two things combined, I want to latch that on to other ideas, other companies we acquire to help grow. Because what we are trying to do is like we're partnering with potentially some investors, or trying to build up our own war chest to make those bets on things that we're excited about. So the overall goal is to build the premium outsourced growth team, but also to essentially function like a private equity firm where we can grow things that we own or have partial ownership in.
I see, because your core expertise could be the secret sauce for some company that you find attractive. Like you guys could jump in and really have a transformative difference.
Exactly right. Like if we see a company that like isn't doing a lot of the best practices and things that we're really good at, and they already have traction, we could be gasoline on the fire. Whereas if we look at companies already doing stuff we're doing and they're struggling, then it wouldn't be a good fit. But it's finding those opportunities that we could partner with or even create ourselves that we're super excited about. Because obviously it's nice doing some work for retainers, but it would be also exciting to do it as partners.
So if you look back towards the end of 2019, what metrics were you looking at? What were your goals for 2020?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely around number of clients, average monthly retainer, and top line goals, and then our margins within that. And then our inputs into that. For me, it's like how many qualified sales calls do I have per week? What is our close rate? And then we're looking at, client happiness and retention, because we basically so like the goal was, so we hit 7 figures, COVID happened, had a little bit of a downturn, and now we're back on track, but looking to really take that up 2x, and then I think we'll be where we want to be.
Okay. I want to hear a little bit about COVID, because like every business, you guys were impacted, but you went through like a million different emotions in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah. So going back to January, when the sky wasn't falling, we thought the business was going great. We hit 7 figures. We're on track to literally have the best year. We're about to make 2 hires, and I was even more excited because I'd finally fired myself from a lot of the work I really shouldn't have been doing to actually be more at that like upper level working on the business rather than in the business. And so I just give that context because March hits, and literally in the span of 48 hours as kind of the pandemic's happening, we lose essentially $500,000 overnight, just evaporates from lost business. So that happens. I actually get sick with COVID. I get my wife sick. Our daycare shuts down. I have 2 kids. One is 3, one's just under 1. And so it's just and again, it's so relative. People are losing their lives. So I don't want to feel too sorry for myself, but relatively speaking, it was a big shift and change for me. And so it was like we had to start from scratch in the middle of March and during a pandemic.
You coined the day Charcoal Gray Friday, and you had to have felt like your business was at risk. I think you went from 12 clients down to 6, and that amounted to over $400,000 in lost revenue. That's a big hit. What did that feel like?
Yeah. So the Charcoal Gray Friday is an ode to my mother-in-law that bought me some really nice charcoal gray sweatpants from Costco that I think I wore for a week and a half straight when I was sick. It was at first, like, because some of these clients would just send me an email like, Jim, it's crazy. We got to pause working together. And I was kind of like, oh, that's fine. Like 1 would send an email, then 2. But then it was a wave of them. And I was in denial. Then I was in shock. But just because I was sick, I literally couldn't even wrap my head around it because I was like so exhausted. So I just felt helpless. Luckily it happened on a Friday so I could rest up, and then going into Monday, I was like, all right, now it's time to figure out a plan. And that's when I kind of defaulted to the idea of, why do I have to be the one that has to come with this grand plan? What if I try and talk to the smartest people I know? What if I bring in my C-level team and let's look at all the options. Let's create some models and scenarios of what we do, and then let's act. So we really tried to take a bias towards action. But yeah, I can get into all of that. But yeah, it was a few different waves of emotion going through all of it.
It was over that weekend when you were home, you and your wife with your daughters, a lot of Frozen 2.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of Frozen 2, a lot of taking shifts, watching them while the other one passes out and takes a nap. We were zombies walking around. There was not a pretty sight.
It really is like the epitome of a lot of people's experience during this COVID pandemic. I mean, people are dealing with kids at home. They're working remotely. I think yours was just amplified because you both had COVID and you had clients that were calling you to cancel their service. They're just breaking up with us left and right. You didn't really have a moment to breathe, it felt like, because you're just being pulled in so many different directions. But honestly, taking a step back, it's like how bad is this going to be? I was like, even if every client fires me, I feel confident I myself could get one. My wife has a job, like we will be okay. So like, I think Tim Ferriss has this idea of fear setting. It's like, if you imagine this worst case scenario, how bad is it really? And if you can understand it's not as bad as you think, it makes at least me chill out a little bit and be on the offense a little bit more, to think, not be so dire, but be like, okay, we can figure this out. What's a creative way to get out of this situation? Okay. So that the perspective gets you out of like paralyzed fear. The paralyzed fear. Yeah. You're sick. You're kind of on a sinking ship. You talked about some of the things that you do, but what's your immediate plan of action?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm not necessarily always good at, but we were pretty good at this, was being swift and decisive. It was a game of math. So right away I was like, okay, what's our revenue? What's our burn? Where are we at? The only advantage we had was that I hadn't made those 2 hires that we desperately needed. So we were already having good margins, but we were overextended. So now we were actually fairly good, but we did need to close business. So I was like, okay, we're good. I'm giving us, 4 months before I need to make any big decisions with the team. If I have 4 months with everybody, how do we go all in? And so the other thought was, everyone's looking for answers. Instead of consuming, let's try and create more than we can consume. And so we took a bias towards, let's reach out to all of our potential partners we can do webinars with, do content with, specifically around this. Let's lean into what's happening. So when people need advice, need strategic help, it's us, because we're talking about it. So that was one. The second thing was, let's kind of take this ABM approach on ourselves, where a lot of industries are negatively impacted by this, but what industries are positively impacted by this? Like e-commerce in general went from overall transactions being 10% to 30%. And so there's actually a huge boom with essential products. So, and also with online education. So we decided to try and target the companies that would need help with growth and conversion rate optimization. And we did an ABM strategy. And we also actually doubled our spend on ads just to get in front of people. So the combination of those things and doing it swiftly actually helped us regain the amount of revenue we lost in 60 days.
I love the content that you guys created about how businesses based on history going through very difficult times, the ones that came out stronger, what did they do? And it sounds like you could use that information in having like new conversations with clients, with prospective clients. How hard a decision was it to double your ad spend at that point?
Well, and by the way, it's not like it was super significant, probably from 100 to 250 a day or something. Because we had been able to prove the unit economics of it with a certain payback time, I wasn't too cautious. I was concerned that people's perspective had changed. Because a lot of people are like, oh, we're interested, but give us a few months. We got to wait this out. But if we could get in front of the right industries, we felt like it would prove okay. But I literally only gave myself 30 days to make sure it worked. But luckily it proved to be ROI positive.
You closed $250,000 in business in 30 days. How much of that came from the ads? Like, what were the different sources of the new clients?
Yeah, it wasn't like there was one silver bullet, like, wow, this one thing was the key to success. It was everything. The ABM strategy got 2, webinars got 1, ads got 1. We got 1 from literally a talk I did a year and a half ago. So we got really lucky with that. And then I think there was like another referral. So it was kind of a combination of everything. But the other thing that helped was, as we were being more active with content, giving people that nudge, whether it's seeing a post we did on LinkedIn or being on our email newsletter, because I see all of those opens and engagements, I could start to see when like prospects would become warm again. So just making noise the right way and adding value, I think in general was kind of the takeaway. So
where are you now today, the business?
Yeah, we actually just made 2 hires. The 2 hires we wanted, we're actually hiring another person. We're at, for annual recurring revenue, we're at 1.5. So we actually passed where we were in January. So it's nice to see we're on the right track, but I'm still paranoid as ever. But yeah, so we've been able to weather the storm.
Paranoid as any great CEO should be.
Great or even not great. I feel like they're all paranoid, but yeah.
How did going through this COVID experience change the way that you look at the business and manage the business?
Yeah, twofold. One is, whenever there's a downturn, how can you position yourself with your balance sheet to where you can be in an offensive position? So it's made me want to be very diligent about, what are our cash reserves in the bank at all times? Because with the agency model, the question is, how much of a burn rate do you want in the bank? Is it 12 months of burn, 6 months, 3 months? And so like we were already pretty good, but it makes me want to be even more intentional with that, especially as we're growing. The second thing is, we got clients before COVID in whatever way they came in, through referrals, through talks. We weren't even intentional about trying to get clients. They just kind of fell to us, which sounds good, but honestly, that's the dumbest thing you can do. And we're a marketing agency. We're literally the cobbler with no shoes because we didn't have a true marketing strategy. And so once COVID happens, we lose half our business, and I'm tasked with closing 10 deals as fast as you can. It's like, oh, well, how did I do that in the past? I didn't really have a strategy. I would just do like some offline speaking and teaching, and it proved to be fruitful. It forced us to create a repeatable and scalable way to get qualified leads, prospects, and clients. And so now that we have that muscle working, we do feel confident that we can really set projections and hit them. But it's unfortunate it took a pandemic for us to be serious about it.
That's human nature. Oftentimes it's like you got to go through pain in order to change. But it sounds like you're eating your own cooking now.
Yeah, finally, right? Which makes sense. It's sad it took us this long, but yeah, really trying to practice what we preach.
In your view, how much cash should you have on hand? I imagine it's very different depending on the company. Like if you're a VC-backed company, you probably keep a lot less cash on hand and you're taking that gamble. You're not in that situation, I don't think. So how much cash should you have for a rainy day versus reinvesting it into the business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One that I think through quite a bit and ask agency founders on, because you get a lot of opinions. Some are like 12 months, 6 months, other like 3. So the way I think about it is, how confident are you in your ability to bring in and close business in a timely fashion? Because if you've proven you can do that, then you could be a little bit riskier and be like 3 to 6 months. If you're not as confident in that, or you're more conservative, I'd say 6 to 12. The other thing that people don't necessarily realize is growing takes a lot of cash. Growth sucks cash. And so one thing, like as we're making new hires, that means our burn rate goes up. So all of a sudden the cash reserves that were 9 months or 6 months go down to like 3 or 6 months, And so it's really doing this balancing act with that. So for me, it's kind of a minimum of 6 months, wanting to do even more, but we're also trying to build up cash reserves for side projects we want to do. So I put that in another bucket. But yeah, it really depends on a few different variables.
How do some of those side projects come into play? Because that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. For us, we really try and think of the criteria of, first, is it something where we think we have an unfair advantage to do it really well based on our capabilities as a growth team, as strong as our processes are and insights we have from industries or categories, and then also the costs to enter this, because it's one thing to build up a content site. It's another thing to try and build a SaaS product, which can be much more capital intensive. And so we have a whole matrix and criteria of evaluating projects we would want to work on. And then we're like, is this something we should build or potentially buy? So we're very early days in that. We launched one called Funnel Teardowns. It's a content site where we break down the top marketing funnels of high growth VC backed companies. We'll eventually turn that into a paid product, but yeah, we're definitely early days and kind of figuring out what is the model for how we choose projects to invest in, to build ourselves, and also how to take time away from our agency to put into that is another thing that I think every agency struggles with when they're doing side projects that we're navigating.
Cool. So listeners will have to take a look. While it's early, it is a free product. We can learn something.
Perfect. Yeah. We'd love feedback, good and bad.
So Jim, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
I think success to me is, do you wake up and you're beyond excited about what you've done and even more excited about what you have ahead of you, and you're happy with your day to day, and you have the freedom to do kind of what you want. So I don't think there's a monetary component to it, or there's materials attached to it. It is, not to get too zen or whatever, but it is finding that level of happiness and fulfillment in what you're doing, and you've set up a lifestyle where you can focus your time and energy to that. It's something where I think so many people, you ask them how they're doing, oh, I'm busy. I'm so busy. I'm crazy busy. And it's almost like this badge of honor where I want to be the person who's like Warren Buffett, where it's how's your day today? And he's literally just reading all day things that he's interested in learning more about and potentially investing, and has essentially no meetings. That to me would be the ultimate kind of lifestyle.
And he's playing his ukulele and drinking a soda.
Yeah, and eating Dairy Queen and living till he's 200. So, right? What are we doing wrong?
That is a good role model to have. Given where you are today, congrats on surpassing where you were pre-COVID. Have you been able to fire yourself again?
Starting to, yes, I have. But the other thing is, as we grow more clients and we can't hire to do some of them, I'll have to put myself back on projects. So it's a little bit of yes and no. I'm slowly getting myself out of some of the day-to-day stuff that is more administrative, but I do still enjoy the growth component. So I do a little bit of that. So I guess it's a maybe as an answer to your question.
Very honest. And it's a process. Well, thanks, Jim. Thanks for sharing your roller coaster of a story. It sounds like you've reached a happy ending since you've been able to build the business back and really getting things back on track. Tell the Inspired Money listener where to find out more about you, follow you, and learn more about your business.
Absolutely. So our website is just growthhit.com with 2 H's. My email is jim@growthhit.com. I'm around and available. I have a personal blog that's jimwhuffman.com, where I talk about having COVID and singing Frozen 2 with my daughter and other business stuff. But yeah, I'm around and available.
Cool. I'll put that all in the show notes. I enjoy your blog. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I really like Jim's advice. Don't go where you're excited to work, but go where you can have the biggest impact. His example was to volunteer to work on the CRM at the startup that he was working at, and it allowed him to work closely with the CEO. This really accelerated his growth. I enjoyed learning about growth marketing, Jim's agency, and a lot of his business lessons. If you push me to pick one favorite inspired money moment, I think this is it.
And then as I can build up this war chest of cash, like what could I do with that? Is that to pay myself and my team really well? Is that to invest in other things? So I've changed 3 times in how I look at money and wealth, because you spend so many hours in a day doing this thing called work. So many people ignore what is the end goal of this? What is the number you're trying to hit? What is that monthly income you want to give you the freedom or the things that you want to have?
Okay, Inspired Moneymaker. Let's connect on social media. Screenshot this episode on your smartphone, post it to social media with your favorite inspired money moment. Don't forget to tag me. I'm inspiredmoney.fm on Instagram, Runnymede Cap on Twitter, that's RUNNYMEDECAP, or Andy Wang 888 on LinkedIn. Use the hashtag InspiredMoney. You can always email me at inspiredmoney.fm/Andy. I'd love to hear from you and happy to give you a shout out here on the podcast. I'll even mail you an Inspired Money sticker or button. Inspired Money is edited by Christopher Wright of Wright Media. Thank you so much for joining me. Last thing, if you haven't yet subscribed, do it right now so you won't miss next week's episode. I'll see you then. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.